So thank you, Felice, for agreeing to do this interview. I really appreciate your time. And prior to sitting down for this interview, you had mentioned that this is a story that you've not wanted to speak about publicly until now.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
So I just wanted to let you start from wherever you feel like the appropriate beginning point.
Okay. I want to explain why I did not want to speak about this experience. I have been writing a book ever since January 1st, 2007, about this experience. It was profound, it was spiritually transformative, and I had no idea whether it was an NDE or not. And so my soul knew, but my mind didn't, and my mind was still searching. Well, the truth is that I'll use the word spirit doesn't want you to know everything all at once. They actually want you to go on the journey of discovery and experiencing how you find the knowings and how you learn to breathe into the wisdom, basically, because the wisdom does not come immediately. And even though you want to go out and shout from the rooftops, maybe people actually don't want to hear you shouting from the rooftops, because maybe that is not the most effective part of your story. Maybe the part of your story that's supposed to be told is the journey and what happens in that journey, so that maybe it can help inform themselves a little bit about their journey. So I'm going to approach this from the standpoint of what is the journey? And I will share my first NDE and my first visitation with you, and then we'll see how much time we have to go to the second NDE and what the journey was after that, okay? So I was, suddenly came into awareness, well, like 300 or 400 feet above the earth, kind of like in the clouds. Though I don't specifically remember fluffy white clouds, I was kind of up there somewhere. And I was in the most beautiful peace, completeness, quiet joy, maybe, something like that. I was in perfection. Everything was perfect. And everything was beautiful to me. There was a landscape of flowing, ripe wheat fields as far as the eye could see. It was a beautiful blue sky day. It was in the afternoon. The sun was off to the west. The wheat was kind of tipping towards the west as if it was following the sun. Interesting, the things you notice. I was in peace. I could also see, way down there somewhere, this teeny tiny little car about this big. And I saw this long strip of freeway bisecting the wheat fields, this teeny tiny car. It's like, okay. And I noticed how still everything was. There was no movement. And that didn't seem at all odd to me at the time. And what was interesting, though it didn't seem odd, is I could see through the roof of this car, I could see the inside of the car. And I saw a woman lying in the back seat, sound asleep, and I saw a man sitting behind the steering wheel, but his head was completely lolled backwards on the seat. He was sound asleep. And I could see the speedometer, which was at 82 miles an hour. And, you know, it was like observing something on, as somebody said today, I looked it up on Google, it was absolutely neutral facts. These were the facts, but they didn't matter to me one bit. I was in perfection. So, you know, but I kind of considered this circumstance and I thought, I don't know why, but the thought arose. If I don't do something, those two people are probably going to die. But I didn't really care. I was like, that's probably going to happen. I had no emotional, connection to it, compassion for it. It was just an observable fact that they were on a course to disaster. I will point out in this moment of time that I was experiencing, I didn't know that was Felice. I didn't recognize her. I didn't know her. I don't even know if I remembered having a body. I was just suddenly, as if birthed into perfection, just enjoying this perfect circumstance around me. So, but I did acknowledge, that obviously I had some core experience memories that would allow me to make the assumption these people will probably die if I don't do something. And that was when the voice appeared. And the voice said, nobody's going to hold it against you. And I am paraphrasing because this is, as we know, psychic, ESP, download, whatever words you use for communication without verbal language. And the voice said, the right thing to do would be to go back. And I'm like, no. Go back? I was like, why on earth would I do that? And so the voice says, nobody's going to hold it against you if whatever you choose to do. No one's going to hold it against you. But the right thing to do would be to go back. And again, I deny the voice. It's like, I don't want to. And I'm actually kind of, I'm kind of impatient and snippy with this voice at this point. What are you doing in here, ruining my perfect moment? But somehow some part of me realized, I don't know why, but I can acknowledge that the right thing to do is to go back. And I don't know why, and I don't want to, but it's the right thing to do, and okay, So before I'm even finish that thought, I'm back in my body. My arm is reaching up to shake the shoulder of my boyfriend at that time, who was driving, but we had already started going off the road and the gravel was already biting on the tires. So he, jerks into awakeness, but we're already careening. So we're careening straight at a telephone pole. He jerks on the steering wheel. We avoid that telephone pole. We're now on a tilt. He overcorrects. We're aiming for another telephone pole. He manages to overcorrect on that one. Now we're careening down the hill. We're on a slope. We get down the hill and we get onto this plowed dirt, kind of like a tractor trail alongside the wheat fields, and we kind of rumble to a stop. Both of us probably like this, him on the steering wheel, me in the back seat. I don't even think we talked about it. We were, it's like when you're in that kind of a shocking moment of, wow, we just skirted death. Okay? So this was, I was raised atheist. So I didn't have any spiritual intelligence, I'll call it, education, where I could interpret this. And maybe it wouldn't have made any difference because so many people who come from whatever religious tradition, this might have been an excluded experience anyways. So I didn't exclude the experience, but I didn't have a context to put it in, and I had no one to tell about it, and I just intuitively felt, I can't tell this to anybody. They're going to think I'm crazy. I just knew that this was, it was 1972. I was 17 years old. You don't tell anybody about this. I don't think I ever talked to anyone about it, okay? For years and years, probably not until 2001. So at any rate, why was I on that highway? Because my first puppy love, Greg Heathcote, had been killed and fighting forest fire. And so my boyfriend at the time and I had driven all the way across Oregon up into Idaho so that I could attend his funeral. And we were driving back from that. And I was emotionally and everything else exhausted. And so I had driven most of the way there because my boyfriend at the time had been sick. So he had a really bad cold or flu or something. He had slept most of the way there. I had driven. I was toast, so I was sleeping in the back seat coming home. So fast forward 3 months. It's like October. So maybe it's like 2 months, 2.5 months, something. A couple of months into the future, I come into awareness again. And I am walking with Greg Heathco down a broad, beautiful kind of, I don't know, it was kind of like a crunchy material, like a walkway, not paved or anything, but it was just like, some sort of crunchy material that you'd be walking on. Very broad. It was like something in Tuscany, there were these narrow, whatever those are, poplar or something, I don't know, trees, kind of beautiful landscape of rolling hills, completely peaceful, just a very beautiful place. And here's Greg, and he's sharing with me all of the most important information about life. And when I come into awareness, I realize, oh my gosh, I've got to remember all this stuff. And I'm having shock, I'm having awe, and I'm having all of a sudden the frantic pressure of, I have got to remember this. I don't remember a thing, not one thing, consciously, right? So at any rate, this was kind of interesting, this visitation, because I had visitations in the future. And so I'm so grateful for this first visitation to give me an understanding of all the different ways in which those who have passed can come, and all the different environments that they can come to us in, and this kind of comes under the category of what is the topography or the landscape of heaven, whatever that means, right? So at any rate, we're walking along, and I'm a little confused because I think they've made a mistake. Obviously, he's alive because we're, communicating. And he tells me, it's time for you to go. You've got to go now. And I'm like, okay, let's go. Let's, you and me, let's get out of here. And it's like the landscape turned from beautiful, kind of pastel almost colors to black and white. And all of a sudden, there's like a wall. And, it's like I could say a prison wall, but nothing that I have here could describe this wall. It was like an intentional wall. It separated one thing from another. It's an intentional wall. And we had arrived at a great big, like the equivalent of an irrigation ditch or an arroyo ditch, like concrete on both sides, straight down, very deep. And there was a hole through the wall that the water went through, that the water passed through. And it was like, okay, we're here, let's jump. And I'm hanging onto his hand, and he's still telling me, I can't go. And I still don't understand why he can't go. I'm so confused. At any rate, he puts his other hand behind my back and he pushes me in. So he sends me back, functionally. I go down into the water, and I call this preternatural sensory experiences. So I feel myself going into the water. I can see up through the water. I can see the bubbles and the stuff. I pop up to the surface, and I see him back there a little ways, just standing there, very passive-faced, watching me go away. And I'm watching him, recede into the distance, and I'm sucked through the tube that goes underneath this wall. I'm completely underwater, and I'm interested because I notice I'm not having a problem with breath. It's like, wow, this is interesting, But I can see the bubbles and, the water all around me, and beautiful clear water too. I just realized I have that memory. And I pop out on the other side, my head comes up, I can see the wall, and it's color again, interestingly enough. And I'm floating away, looking backwards at the wall, and I awakened. So I had this visitation, in what ordinarily we would call the dream state. this was not a spiritually transformative set of events. And this is an amazing thing to me that it wasn't, because it just seems to me like it's pretty amazing, and it was amazing to me, but it was not spiritually transformative. So I did what I put it on my pantry. I put both of those in my pantry, saving it for the day when I needed to bake a cake and I needed those two ingredients. And I went on through my atheist life, doing, all the things that we do, college, marriage, divorce, college, more stuff. Went on through life. I got married when I was in graduate school in the MBA program. And my husband, Scott Jackson, was one of the most amazing men I ever met. He was brilliant. He was so smart, and he was so had so much courage in so many ways, and was so creative in so many ways. He was probably also Asperger's, though we didn't have a term for it then. So his emotional availability to me, who is more empathic, was not probably a very good match. But at any rate, we married, we moved overseas, we went to Indonesia, and we began our international travel, living, bearing children experience. We had 4 kids in 3.5 years. We lived in 5 different countries by the time we'd been married 5 years. We just had a life of constant change, and it became very difficult to live with him. It was extremely difficult, but I've got 4 little children, and so, you do what you have to do. You make it work, you make it work. But after 20 years, I finally, I recognized if I'm going to leave, if I'm going to have a career, which means a chance to leave because, you have to support yourself, this is the time to do it. And so when the children were in high school, we got divorced, and he moved back to Indonesia. And the 4 children and I were still in the United States. Now I'm going to skip forward. This is the portion that I told you I would not share, which is the circumstances that led to my NDE. And I will not share those just yet. Next year I will. So, a huge tragedy happened in my life. And part of that tragedy was the death of Scott. And when I received the news on the phone from the American Embassy in Jakarta, I watched the world recede from my view as if it was I'm viewing through a telescope the opposite direction. Everything got tinier and tinier and tinier instead of getting bigger. And with eyes wide open, I fell backwards into space. And the blackness closed in on the small visual of light and the circumstances and the room. And I had the experience of the sensation is, if you've ever had this sensation in a dream where you go off a cliff and you're falling, and you're like, it's like disequilibrium to the nth degree, and it's nauseating and it's terrifying, and you're gonna die if you don't wake up. That's what it felt like times 10, and I knew I wasn't gonna wake up. So I didn't know what was happening, but I didn't know why it was happening or what we would define it as. I simply knew what was happening to me in my experience in that moment, and I continued to fall backwards and have a series of experiences in this light speed journey into darkness. And from the perspective of being in there, it was a really long time. It's like really long time. And you know how when if you get into, like a really close call, it's like time slows down, right? It attenuates, but your brain is going at light speed. And so time seems to expand and attenuate. I would explain this kind of sensation of time as being something like that. So I had experiences which, in short, shredded me as a human being. Shredded my desire to live, my will to live, my reason to live, I went through what would be the, I later found out was the Kubler-Ross 5 stages of grief. I had a unique experience of personal transformation with each of those stages of grief during this journey. And by the time I got through all of this stuff, I had no resistance. And we talk about resistance in life. Oh, I'm going to get rid of my resistance or something. We cannot. We cannot. And this is just so key because we think, oh, what's keeping me from my belief, making it embodied and real? Resistance. If we could all just say resistance, go away, well, that'd be great. We can't. It is intrinsic to our composition, our nature. It got shredded. I was shredded, and I was left in a state, I wish I could come up with a better word. I felt like a grub. I mean, I had no strength, I had no ability to do anything. I had no will. I'm just existing. And I'm still falling, and I'm still in vertigo. I'm still going at light speed. I suppose the word would be hopeless. Everything I have come into complete acceptance of whatever shall be. I mean, it felt like this could go on through eternity, but this is just it. This is it. So I don't know how long that lasted, but it, seemed like a long time. And without transition, all of a sudden, I was stopped. You're stopped. Usually there's something that's in between. No, nothing in between. All of a sudden I'm stopped. And the journey that I made, I refer to that as falling through the black hole because that's what it felt like. It felt like it was swirling around me and I was diving through it at faster than light speed. And it didn't feel like something like magnetically was pulling me. It just felt like I was just going light speed through the space. And then I stopped. And, I'm like, what now? Everything that has happened is so weird, what now? And I'm in complete stillness. I'm in complete blackness, and I've come to say that I have perfect sight and perfect darkness. So it is the blackness in which you have sight. And it was as if, it's a simplistic description, but it was as if I could see the perimeter, if you will, of the black hole around me, and I was at the focal point, the singularity, the very center. It's kind of like a clock, the very center point where nothing moves. At this point, nothing moves. And I was at that point in infinite black. And it wasn't like I was floating. I was simply there. And then I became aware of a presence around me. Formless. Infinite, though I did not have a perspective of the infinity of this presence with a capital And again, this is a simplification of an experience that we're trying to translate into language, right? It's as if my soul was held, like a baby, like you're cradled inside of this presence and being held with all the love that you would receive from mother, father, anything when you come newly into this world, and all you know is the feeling of protection and presence and complete care for you. And I received, the crystal was dropped in, the download, and the download goes something like this. You are loved beyond all imagining. You are celebrated as if by a crowd of millions. You are cherished for all of your perfection and your imperfection. And the one I have never been able to put words to is there's no forgiveness, because there's nothing to forgive. The celebration of the journey of perfection and imperfection was the message. And the compassion, sympathy, and empathy for the journey was just imbued, straight into my heart and soul. And I had to confront myself in that moment and go, how can something love me this much? I don't even come close to loving me this much. And then I felt it. If the presence can love me this much, I have an obligation to learn to love me this much. Well, I'll never meet that, but it's the goal, that how can I insult the divine presence with my lack of self-love when so much is being given to me? So it was very humbling, and it was very affirming, and the amount of love that you receive is just so overwhelmingly wonderful that it's just hard to express in human terms, And then I remembered why I was upset. I remembered my grief. And it came back into me, and I started to feel that loss and that grief again. And the presence came back to me with giving me the knowing everything is imperfection. All of this is perfect. And it was reinforced. And in those moments, I recognized and acknowledged that it was perfection. That everything that had happened was perfection. And I was no longer in grief and in sorrow and in loss for those moments. And I recognized it. All of it is perfection. And, I know the thing I forgot to say, which is kind of important, when the presence came, when I came into awareness of the presence around me, I recognized it. I knew it. It was as if I had always known it, and I'd just forgotten that I knew it. But I recognized it and knew it again. And that's interesting to me, being raised as an atheist, to have this realization of, I don't know how, I don't know where, but I know this. I know this. So I'm still cradled, I'm still being bathed with this just infinitude of love. And I think I'm staying. I just assume this is it. It's so good. I mean, why would I leave? I don't have any desire to leave. Nobody asked me whether I wanted to stay either. I'll let you know that. You know, you can stay if you want to, but I didn't get any choice this time. I hit the floor. And I was back in this world. And I am still filled with, blown away grace, but blown away love, blown away transformation of self. And confused, because it's like I'm back in 3D world. What the hell? And maybe that was the point. And so, and then I realized I was here, and I think I was momentarily kind of irritated. I think that was the what the hell point. And then all of my grief poured in on me. All my trauma poured in on me. And I could still feel all of this grace and love and whatever it's called, this part of myself that I'd never had never been present in this tiny container that was Felice, was now stretched clear over to here, containing all of that unbelievable experience and gifts. And now stretched over to this side, far beyond the container of Felice, was this loss and grief and trauma. And I didn't know if I could stretch that big. So maybe we have a choice to stretch or not to stretch, but I stretched. And that's the part of my journey that I feel is more interesting, is what is the journey in your life afterwards? This is an experience. And a lot of people crave the experience, and they chase the experience, and they want the experience, and they think the experience is it. It's not. The experience is the moment of opportunity, of transformation, of opening for you to then go do the work, have the journey, grow the wisdom, and become the human being that you're here to be on Earth School. And that's hard to know when you have such profound experiences. It's not about the experience. It's about the journey on Earth. And that is a whole talk, and I can't wait to do the whole talk on the journey on Earth. But I have one more piece, if we have time, I want to share with this. This is good. Again, see, not quite 3 months afterwards, I came into awareness walking out of a forested glade, very beautiful, beautiful. I live in Oregon, it's so beautiful there and so green there. I was kind of walking out with this forest behind me, and a meadow was kind of opened in front of me. And Scott, who I had, let me assure you, such a difficult relationship with, and who I loved deeply. I was deeply in love with him. And, there comes a point where love is not enough. There has to be action around what is loving, what is kindness, what is compassion, what is working together to create a life that is beautiful. That couldn't work. But I had loved him deeply. And I was still really mad at him. Okay, so let me assure you, we had an acrimonious divorce. We had, a lot of acrimony over the years of marriage. He said he would never speak to me again. He didn't. There was no communication about the children or anything else. I had no contact information. I didn't know who he worked for. He took off 2 days after the divorce and went to work in Indonesia. Finished, done, out. So I was still mad. I was still very angry. It's very difficult to love someone, be angry at someone, and lose someone. All three of these are really pretty profound sets of emotions, and to have all three of them, it's a lot. It's a lot to hold. I was still in that state. There he was, standing in the meadow. looking at me, looking straight at me with his eyes. And in his life, he had been so tense that he had like tension wrinkles on his face. I mean, it was like when he smiled, it was like, you know, I mean, it was, when you say crack a grin, his was literally crack your face to grin. And the smile was full of softness, and it was a complete, full, the most beautiful smile I've ever seen on him. And his face was relaxed, and his body was relaxed. And he was so beautiful. When I first laid eyes on him, you know, just the whole, I'd never seen anything so beautiful. That's how beautiful he was. And I was so happy to see him. And then I started noticing, you know, the smaller things, right? He was 54 when he was killed. He appeared like 32 to 34 at his peak of perfection. And as I walked towards him, I received again the download. And the download was similar to what the presence had given me, but it was on a personal level. I love you. I have always loved you. We have always been together, and we always will be. And I'm going, oh my God, reincarnation is real? I mean, what? We had past lives together? We're going to have more lives? Or is that up here? I mean, you know, because the great thing is, no matter how mystical your experience, in many of them, you can still think. I have had experiences where I have no language and no thought. But in some levels of the subtle realm, we can still think. And so, you know, I'm just like, wow. But I'm embracing it. It's like, of course. Because I'm feeling the same thing. I'm feeling this absolute love for him. There is nothing there. And I'm, you know, and I'm noticing I don't have any of these negative feelings. And in that moment of meeting him, our relationship on a soul level for anything we experienced in the material world was healed. It was gone. And the message, you know, inside of the download was, there is nothing to forgive between us. Nothing. Forgiveness is not a word here. The only thing here is love. And then he gave me another thing that was a little bit confusing. It wasn't confusing. Let me rephrase that. It was not confusing. I felt embarrassed. I felt sad. He said, I died for you, so you could have the journey. You're going to go on. And what I noticed, that was so profound for me that I couldn't have gotten from Jesus. I was raised atheist, you know, Buddha, you know, Muhammad, whoever. I didn't have relationship with any of these figures, right? So the additional thing that I got from Scott in that visitation was that his earth suit had been unzipped and dropped off like, you know, like a towel in the bathroom, you know, it had just fallen off of him. None of his wounds from life, none of his pain, his anxiety, his angst, his anger, his criticism, his judgment, none of it was there. None of it existed. No one would know better than me, who had had 4 children with him and lived with him for 20 years, that this was the crystalline soul with none of the human accoutrements that we step into this world and kind of, you know, get as our package vehicle, you know, check the accessories, whatever. You know, none of that was there. Every bit of it was gone. And he was so he was so beyond angelic that the only term I've ever been able to come up with was archangel, which I've had Christians tell me is actually not correct because that's someone who hasn't manifested in the physical form. Doesn't matter to me. But the point is that he was so elevated in frequency, in beauty, in spirit, in soul, that I knew that his ascension level was so much higher than, for example, Greg Heathcote that I met was at a different level. And he was 18, when he died. And then I've had other visitations, and I've seen other kind of levels of places where people are when I have gone and had visitations with them. He was an archangel, absolutely beautiful. And so I began walking over to him, and suddenly, as happens in these things, I became aware that he was standing on a white, like a dais, and I had to take 2 steps up onto the dais to walk across the dais to him. And I can't remember if there was, it seems like there was like there was a wall in the back of the dais. This is a little filmy because I was so focused. I mean, I was just, our eyes were locked. And so now that I've received the download, now that I've observed the changes, now that I have transcended our earthly experience and stepped into our soul connection that we are standing inside of, and now I'm observing the other weird things that are going on. And I realize that I'm seeing every pore on his face. And not only the pore, but I'm seeing the shadow of the little pit of the pore. I'm going, well, that's really weird. But, and I'm kind of fascinated with this. And I can see every individual strand of hair, and they're like the most alive, vibrant hair I've ever seen. And I can see the rosy glow in his cheeks. And I'm fascinated by this because I can see him more clearly now than I ever saw him in the physical dimension. And I walk over to him and we embrace, and cheek to cheek, we did not kiss, but cheek to cheek, and he held me, and I could feel the warmth of his skin on my skin. I had acute sensory experiences. And I was observing the acuteness, of those experiences because it was so weird, right? It's just like you don't expect. And I knew I was staying there forever. We were together. We'd always been together. We were always going to be together. Clearly, I'm staying here now. And then I remembered. That I at least needed to come back and tell those who would be left behind that I was leaving, and that it was okay. I didn't want them to have that grief. And so I communicated, I just have to go say goodbye and I'll be right back. And I honestly believed that. I knew I would be instantly back. I just had to go make things right down here in Earth World, and I would be right back. And of course, I've never been back. But when I woke up from that visitation, I had been bone cold for 2.5, 3 months. Freezing. I could not get warm. Shock does that to you. Shock changes your physiology. And my cheek was warm. I could feel the warmth on my cheek, and I could feel the relaxation of my body. And I could still smell him, the smell of him. So the reason I share that part of this experience is through that gift of his visitation, I know that's going to happen to me. I get to zip off this police suit, who has not always been the best performer in her role down here in the puppet factory, but it's going to fall off of me. And it makes me know that every person that I meet, no matter how I may see them or judge them or what I think of their actions, is going to get their puppet suit zipped off of them too. And that is something, we've heard a lot of conversations and things about how do we engage in maintaining an open-hearted, love condition. Because we are so hardwired for judgment in our world. And that is one of the things that brings me back there, that I try to, and, sometimes I'm really good at it, sometimes I'm not so good at it. Sometimes I remember, sometimes I forget. It's a constant, forgetting and remembering process. But that is one of the things that I constantly remember for myself, that I don't know what the plan is, if there's a plan or if there's a program, but what I can take are my own experiences. I have the authority of my own experiences to guide me, and that is one of them that tells me that every single human being, as far as I know, that's what happens to them. They get to zip this off and they get to stand in their pure soul. And whatever else happens in terms of life review or whatever else, I don't know, because I haven't had that yet. Can't speak to it. But what I do feel assured of is that all of this, hurts, pains, happinesses, character, whatever, zip, not there. Your pure soul is going to stand.
And so I wonder if you can speak about, that paradox or that duality between experiencing such incredible, oneness and love and beauty, and at the same time how that increases your capacity to hold, that suffering as well.
It is very possible. Had I not had this eyes wide open, what I have come to feel comfortable calling a near-death experience, I don't know if I would have chosen to live. I can't know. I really don't know. So in the early time periods of 2007, I would be in such extreme trauma that it slows down time too. 5 minutes as an attorney. It's like when you're in pain, it's like time is really big. And then something would happen, like someone would come over wanting to console me. And I would have this, what for me, remember, I've lived my life with an atheist, maybe a potential agnostic, somebody jumps out of the closet and scares me into God beliefs, maybe that'll, but, I didn't have tools, education, anything else. So this is a little hard to explain, but I had the experience of people coming over to console me, and the minute I would feel them coming, it was like a transformational experience. For me, I moved from grief to heart. And I would feel myself filled with light. Just truly light and love. And I called it grace. I would just have a feeling of pure grace. And that grace was so calm and so loving and so centered and so stable that it was, it was truly schizophrenic to go from this over here, whoop, we're going to drop you into grace right now. Okay, I'm in grace. Float out there, bring them into a big hug, heart to heart. I'd feel grace going down through my head, out through my solar plexus. Whoosh. And I would just hold them and just feel this compassion, not feeding, but maybe filling the holes that they needed to have filled so they could hold the destruction that they were carrying. And I found my greatest happiness, my greatest peace in those moments. And that was an extraordinary gift to receive. So that would be like my reprieve, to remind me, you have this over here. You have this over here. And it was many years down the road, but I wrote this statement and I stuck it to the wall, taped it to the wall beside my desk at my villa in Bali. And it said, learning to love the journey of living in paradox. Learning to love the journey of living in paradox, because it is so schizophrenic. And I also became clear over time to me that I was schizophrenic. I had a body and I had a soul. And they both had a personality, and they both had needs, and they both had demands, and they both had capacities, and they both had a place in my life. And so my journey was them learning to live together in a gracious way. And I'll assure you, I was not gracious before this experience. I was as screwed up as anybody else. I was miserable. I had the silent scream. I was working, I had my own consulting practice. I worked insane hours and no exercise. I mean, there was just nothing going on for my body. My body was a wreck at this point in my life. And so the body had needs, the soul had needs, and they had to learn how to become really loving friends with each other. And that's part of that journey that I talked about, which I believe is truly the bigger story. How does that journey work? And the biggest part of that story is, to me, that we have such excitement when we come back from transformative experiences that we think so we have an experience, we're so full that we are the epitome of the proselytizer that nobody wants to have knocking at their door. And it's because we need to share, but we actually don't have anything to share yet. Not that can perhaps be communicated to somebody else in a way that has value to them. Because all we have is an experience they can't relate to. We don't have the wisdom of our journey yet. And the experiences that we have, also the wisdoms, are inside of the wisdoms, And when we get a download, those downloads continue to unfold, I think probably for the rest of one's life. And it's like, oh, and that was there too. And I've always known that, but somehow I didn't figure out or pick up that was really very valuable. So I have spent 17 years moving towards telling this story and sharing this story in a way that there is wisdom instead of just experience and tragedy. Because the true story, again, for me, is that was just insemination for the rebirth.
Well, anything else you want to add? That might be a great stopping point.
I think that's where we stop.
It's perfect.
That is perfect.
Thank you so much.
Thank you both so much.
It is incredible. That is so touching. I
Thank you.
think what you bring is so grounded and unique, and I think it's so honest the way you talk and the emotions, and I so relate, in a very deep, heartfelt way to what you say. And I think my husband, can relate as well. the way you talk
Yeah,
about,
absolutely.
you know,
Who's a famous